I have never played tennis, but this might be one of my favorite dresses. Yes, it is short, but there's shorts underneath. And guess what? There are pockets. You can also ditch the skirt panel and make a romper instead. You can wear it for a yoga class, just to chill around, or use it as a one-piece swimsuit. This is an advanced beginner level sewing project, and it is very doable to sew it in a day. I am using the Billie tennis dress and romper pattern, which you can get in our Etsy or online store. This pattern comes in the US letter and A4 format that you can print with any regular printer, or in A0 format that you can print at a copy shop. Please don't be confused that my printed page looks slightly different and I have a full skirt panel. I did a survey on Instagram whether you would like a full skirt panel or one half to save paper. And with a small advance, one half won and I redid the pattern. By the way, come follow us on Instagram. I often ask about our upcoming designs and your opinions matter a lot to us. For this project you will need a jersey fabric that has at least 50% of stretch and you can stretch it in all directions. Here I have a polyester fabric that is made specifically for activewear. I have added links in the description. You can also use cotton jersey fabrics as long as they are stretchy enough. You will also need matching threads. I highly recommend to change sewing machine needles to stretch needles or jersey needles because they don't damage knit fabrics. And it would be great if you could use a twin needle for hems or a cover stitch machine. If you don't have any of those, you might as well use a 3-step zigzag stitch for hems. As an option, you might want to add some pads if you don't want to wear a bra but still would prefer some covering. I will be mostly using a serger, but if you don't have it, take a look in description. I have added a link to video what sewing machine stitches you can use instead. I had a tough time to find which is the right side of this fabric because it looks so similar from both sides. I placed all details on folded fabric except the skirt panel because it's too wide, and if I place it on a single layer of fabric, I can squeeze these details closer to each other and save some fabric. Don't forget to cut the notches, there's plenty of them. They will be extremely helpful later when we will join the details together. If you are worried that your fabric might tear from these snips, you can use a marker to mark the notches instead. Also snip notches at the middle for those details that are cut on fold. Let's start by preparing the back panels, neckline and armholes. Take the binding detail and lay it on the back panel with the right sides facing each other. I am not going to pin it, I will stitch as I go. After you finish the seam, cut off the rest of the binding tape. Make a stitch 7 mm apart from the edge. Try not to stretch the binding tape too much, otherwise the neckline will look gathered. Understitch the previously made seam allowance to the binding tape. Make a stitch around 1 mm apart from the previously made seam. Make sure that the needle always goes through the binding and seam allowance. If you are a very experienced sewist, you can skip this step. However, I find it much easier to work with the binding later if it is understitched. Take a look at my fingers. Try to pull the back panel and the binding in opposite directions to flatten everything out as much as you can, while still keeping the seam allowance towards the binding. Do all these steps for both armholes and the neckline. Now fold the binding towards the wrong side of the fabric. Press along the edges in a way that you can see a tiny bit of the back panel. This way the binding will not be visible from the right side of your dress or romper. After that, fold the binding tape around the seam allowance and press again. If you have a cotton fabric, this will be much easier, but in my case, it's very difficult to press the binding in a way it stays there because I have a polyester fabric. So I'm skipping the pressing and I will fold the binding right away when I will be stitching. Make a stitch around 7 mm apart from the edge. This might vary if you have cut the binding wider or narrower, or if you have made a wider stitch before. Feel free to pick the width yourself. It could be from 5 mm up to 1 cm. Just make sure that the stitch stays even all the time, because it will be visible on the right side of the top. In other words, if you start the stitch 7 mm apart from the edge, make sure it stays 7 mm apart all this time. Repeat the step with other armhole and the neckline as well. Here you can see from another angle. I fold the binding tape around the seam allowance and then I stitch. Give a quick press to flatten out the back panel. To be honest, I slightly overstretched the binding tape along the curved lines, that's why it doesn't look perfect, but ironing helps a lot. Lay both front top panels with the right sides facing. Pin the neckline. Stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Understitch the neckline. Make a stitch 1 mm apart from the previously made seam in a way it goes through the inner layer of the top and through the seam allowance. It doesn't matter which is the inner layer, they both are the same, so pick randomly. As you can see, the neckline doesn't stay flat at those curved edges. That's why we need to take the seam allowance and make a few cuts in it. Be very careful not to cut in the stitches or in the top panels itself. These trims should be around 7 mm deep. Make more of them where the seam is more curved. This will release the tension and we will be able to press the neckline flat. Press the neckline in a way you can see a tiny bit of the outer layer. This way the inside layer will never be visible from the right side. Lay the back panel on the front panel's outer layer's right side. Start pinning the shoulder seams by matching the front and back panel's necklines. Then fold the front panel's inner layer over the back panel strap. So for now the back panel is in the middle. Make a stitch 1 cm apart. Do this step for both shoulder seams. When we flip the strap, the corner is looking kind of bulky, so let's trim off the seam allowance against the corner. Leave around 2 mm of the seam allowance next to the stitch and cut the rest at an angle. There is also a lot of thickness from the binding tape on the back panel. Once we trim off some of the seam allowance, the straps will look much smoother. Now we need to finish the armholes for the front panel. Flip the front panels in a way that their right sides are facing each other. Pin the armholes. Start a stitch right from the point where the back panel's armhole is. Then stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Make sure that you don't make any stitches on the back panel. The back panel is somewhere there in the middle, but it has to be left untouched. Do this step for both armholes. You can trim off the seam allowance at the corners at the shoulder seam here as well. After that, flip the strap and check how it looks. If you don't like it, there's still a chance to redo this stitch. Let's also understitch the armholes the same way we did for the neckline. This time we won't be able to understitch the whole area, that's totally fine. You know, something is better than nothing. So just start stitching the inner layer to the seam allowance, starting from the side seam up along the armhole as far as you can get. Once it gets really difficult, just stop stitching and understitch the other armhole in the same way. Here we have exactly the same issue as with the neckline. The curved seam allowance isn't allowing the armhole to be flat. That's why we need to make a few trims in the seam allowance. Make more of them where the seam is more curved. Press the armholes in a way that you can see a tiny bit of the outside layer. Lay the front center panel with the front side panels right sides facing each other. Pin. Make a stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Okay, I didn't pin because I try to avoid pins when using a serger. Feel free to skip pinning if you are also comfortable with your serger. If this is one of your first projects, then probably pinning is the best idea, but be extremely careful to take out the pins before they get to the serger's knife. This is an optional step, but I am going to top stitch the seam allowance to get this corset look. Lay the seam allowances towards the center and make a stitch through center panel and seam allowance around 6 mm apart from the previous stitch. Try to keep the distance as even as possible. Give a quick press to both of these seams. Lay the front top on the table and flatten it out. 99% both bottom edges will not match because we did it under stitching. That's okay. We need to make sure that the top lays flat. I am even adding some pins to ensure that. Now take the middle section and lay it on the top panel with the right sides facing each other. Match the middle point first, then match the top notches with the seams of the middle section and then match the side seams. It is slightly inconvenient to pin because the curves are going in opposite ways. That's why the notches are our best friends. We need to match the details at these points and then have a mindset that we are going to stitch from one notch to another. What I mean is that it is impossible to lay the whole midsection flat on the top panel. What we can do is to lay midsection flat from one notch to another, stitch it, and then focus on getting to the next notch. That's like a lesson of life. Pin and stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. I'm sorry I didn't press the record button when I was stitching, but I hope you got the idea. Lay the seam allowance downwards. Top stitch the seam allowance to the midsection. Make a stitch around 6 mm apart from the previously made seam. I like how it looks, plus it helps to keep the seam allowance in place. Press the seam we just made. Lay the front and back panels with the right sides facing. Pin the side seams. Make a stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Try to do your best to match the edges at the armholes. For me, this is the most difficult challenge with this dress. If you are also using a serger, take a needle with a big eye and hide the serger's threads inside the seam allowance. This will ensure that the serger stitch stays in place forever. I have seen on Instagram people discussing that it's not such a big deal, you can simply trim off the serger's threads. No go. Trust me, I have done this, the seams don't hold well, especially after washing, and even more for tight-fitted garments, this is a must. Let's prepare the pockets. If you don't want them, jump to the next chapter. Start by neatening the top edges of both pockets. Here we have a 2 cm seam allowance, so we need to fold 2 cm of the upper edge of the pockets. I start by marking that amount with the marker because the upper edge is slightly curved and that helps me a lot. Fold the upper edge towards the fabric's wrong side in a way the fold line goes along the markings. Pin it down. I will hand stitch with a regular needle and a thread because I'm still a beginner with sewing with the twin needle or with a cover stitch machine, so hand stitching gives me a lot more confidence that I will make a perfect hem. If you are more experienced, of course, you can skip this step. Or if you are using a 3-step zigzag stitch, then also you can stitch right away. I am stitching right through the serger's middle stitch. This hand stitch has two purposes. The first, obviously, it is to hold the fabric, but the second is to be a guideline on the right side of the fabric, so I can see where I need to stitch. Sorry, my English isn't that great. You will see what I mean in the next steps. I am going to use my cover stitch machine, but if you don't have it, I highly recommend to use a twin needle for your sewing machine. If you don't know how to set up a twin needle, I have linked down another video where I show it in more steps. In both cases, you need to make a stitch on the right side of the fabric. The hand stitch has to go right through the middle of both needles. Take out the previously made hand stitches. Press both upper edges of these pockets. The pocket goes on the front leg side panel. The upper edge of the pocket has to match the notches. Ideally, the pocket shape should match the leg panel. In my case, you can see the bottom edge isn't matching. I have had some cutting error. If it's like few millimeters, that's okay. It will get hidden in the hem allowance. Make a stay stitch with the sewing machine 5 mm apart from the edge. If you are more experienced, you might skip the step and get to the next step. Lay the center leg panel on the side leg panel with the right sides facing. Pin the middle seam. Start by matching the notches. Stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Here as well, the lines are curved in opposite directions. Also, the seam at the hem is angled. Just make the stitch step by step. If necessary, pause for a moment, flatten out the layers and continue sewing. I will top stitch these seams so they would match the top panels. It will not be noticeable because the skirt panel will cover the shorts, but I want to do it just for myself. And if you are making the romper option, then even more it's better to do it so the top part and shorts would look coherent. Lay the seam allowance towards the middle and make a stitch around 6 mm apart from the previously made seam. Press both leg panels flat. Lay the back leg panel on the front leg panel with the right sides facing each other. Pin the side seams and also pin the inside leg seams. Okay, again, I am skipping the pinning because these are so much easier seams to join, and make a stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Take one leg and flip it from the inside out. Place it inside the other leg so the right sides are facing each other. Pin the crotch seam. Start by matching the inside leg seam and the notches. Make a stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. If you are making the romper option, then go to the next chapter. Lay both skirt panels with the right sides facing. Pin the side seams and stitch 1 cm apart from the edge. Let's stay stitch the skirt panel to the shorts. Flip the skirt and the shorts to their right sides. Lay the shorts inside the skirt panel. Now the shorts right side is facing the skirt wrong side. Match the side seams and match the skirt middle notch with the shorts middle seams at the front and at the back. If you are very experienced, you probably don't even need to stay stitch. But I will. You might do it with the sewing machine and do a stitch like 5 mm apart from the edge. However, I got worried that sewing machine stitch won't be elastic enough, and every time I would put on this dress over my hips, then I would hear how the stitches are popping. So instead, I decided to do a hand stitch to fix the skirt to the shorts. If you have followed any of my tutorials before, you probably know I try to avoid hand stitching as much as possible, but sometimes I do it as well. Now we need to join the top part to the bottom part. Lay the top panels on the skirt in a way that the right sides are facing each other. Match the side seams, middle notches, and also those corset style seams with the short front leg seams. Pin around. Stitch around 1 cm apart from the edge. If you are using a serger, remember to be extremely careful with the pins. This seam will get a lot of pressure when you will be wearing this dress. That's why here it is extremely important to properly hide the serger's threads. In case if you already cut the serger's threads too short, an alternative option would be to make a few backstitches with your sewing machine at the point where your serger stitch is ending. If we were a professional manufacturing company, then we would have a special machine that makes securing stitches. But we are not, that's why I find this tail hiding method the fastest. If you also did the hand stitches, it's time to take them out. I just realized I'm a hypocrite. So this isn't extremely necessary, but I do not like that the seam allowance at the waistline naturally is going upwards. Especially since my fabric is slightly transparent, the seam allowance is visible from the right side. I would prefer that it would be laying downwards. That's why I'm going to top stitch the seam allowance only to the shorts panel. I will push the seam allowance towards shorts and make a stitch around 6 mm apart from the previously made seam. I said I'm a hypocrite because previously I didn't want to do a stay stitch with the sewing machine because I was worried that the stitches might pop. But here I am actually stitching with the sewing machine around the waistline. And if it is the future me speaking, I have worn this dress a few times and the stitches didn't pop, so it's totally fine. If you are using a twin needle, neaten the skirt hem and also the shorts hems. Mark 2 cm of the hem allowance. Right now we will do very similar steps as we did for the pocket bag upper edge. I'm sorry, not even similar, but we will do exactly the same steps. Fold the hem allowance in a way that the markings are exactly on the folded edge and pin. Do a hand stitch right in the middle of the serger's stitch along the serger's second needle stitch. As we did with the pockets, here as well use this hand stitch as a guideline that goes right in between the twin needle or both cover stitch machine needles. I would like to add that if you are using a cover stitch machine, there's not really a need to neaten the edges before. I have seen that people do it, but it's not really necessary. I did it because honestly I did plan to use a twin needle. I tried it, but the specific fabric is very slippery and I was having issues to find proper settings on my sewing machine. I was running out of time, so I just changed my plans and used cover stitch machine instead. I had never had issues with the twin needle before, so I'm quite sure that you will have a better success. However, I will remind again, in case if you don't have a twin needle or a cover stitch machine, you can use a 3-step zigzag stitch for shorts, because there it is extremely important that the hem is elastic. But for the skirt hem, feel free to use even the regular straight stitch, because the skirt hem will not get stretched and it doesn't have to be elastic. Take out the hand stitches after you have finished hemming. Give a proper press to the skirt and to the shorts hems. If you want to, you can add pads. Place them inside and hand stitch them to the inner layer of the top. I did a few hand stitches at a few points, and be careful not to stitch through the outer layer of the top. That's it, we have finished. Please let me know what kind of fabric did you choose, and did you make the dress or the romper option? Or you made the romper but you are going to use it as a swimsuit? I am very curious. Please leave us a like if you enjoyed this tutorial and subscribe to our channel for more sewing and knitting tutorials. See you next time! Bye!